Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth Microsoft NextGen Heroes session. Today, with the topic of leading tech, Microsoft MVP, and Microsoft regional directors. So, firstly, I want to greet all of you who have joined us on this special day for our Microsoft NextGen Heroes community because with us today we have an extraordinary guest who will share his amazing tech and life story from his entire career and how he has gone through the heights of reaching the Microsoft MVP and the Microsoft Regional Directors Program. So let's dig into the agenda of the day first. Um, so we'll make a quick introduction of all three of us. For those of you who are new to our community, you have the chance to meet us all right now. Also, our colleague Marco will then speak some technical stuff about Microsoft Learn, and my dear colleague Nicholas will then make a short intro about Kent and his amazing tech journey. Also, not to forget to mention our proud sponsors, so Microsoft Learn, the Microsoft MVP program, and also our mother community, Microsoft Zero to Hero. So, I would like firstly to introduce myself. So, hello everyone. My name is Bojan Ivanovski. I'm currently pursuing my software engineering degree at the University American College in Skopje, Republic of Macedonia. I'm also an active Microsoft Learn student ambassador, and together with my colleagues, Nicholas and Marco, we are trying to spread tech vibes everywhere we go. Also, fun facts about me, I'm a DevOps enthusiast and also a person who loves cloud computing, especially Azure. Not to forget to mention that automation is definitely my playground, and I love to do automations, especially when it comes to deploying apps on the cloud. Not to take any more of your time, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Marco Atanasov.
Thank you, Bojan. It was a wonderful introduction. So, hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us for this presentation. Firstly, my name is Marco Atanasov, and I'm also currently pursuing my degree in software engineering at Skopje, Macedonia. With my short experience in the IT world, I quickly found my love for DevOps and the tools that are used in the everyday life of a DevOps engineer. I would also like to mention that I love being part of MLSA and Microsoft Zero to Hero community because I have made a lot of lasting friendships and have also improved my professional life as well. Now I will let Nicholas tell you about a bit more about himself. Nicholas?
Yeah, thank you, Marco. So, hello everyone. My name is Niklas Olsen. I'm a Microsoft Learn student ambassador together with Marco and Bojan as well. And in my free time, I use a lot of my time diving into Microsoft Intune, write bloggers about Intune, but also speaking about Intune on different conferences as well. So if you would like to read more about what I do in my free time, you can read my blogs on learnintune.net. So before we get started with this session, Marco will give us an introduction to Microsoft Learn.
Exactly. So, what is Microsoft Learn? Basically, it's an online learning platform by Microsoft that offers free interactive training on a wide range of Microsoft technologies, from cloud computing with Azure to productivity tools like Microsoft 365 and local development with Power Platform. Microsoft Learn also includes learning rooms, which are collaborative spaces where learners can connect with Microsoft experts and peers to discuss topics, ask questions, and get guidance on their learning journey. You can join our learning room called Microsoft Zero to Hero. It's a special place on Microsoft Learn that guides beginners through through foundational skills up to more advanced knowledge. It's perfect for anyone just starting in tech or more professional, more experienced professionals. Without further ado, let's dive into the main topic for today.
So this time we are happy to welcome Kent Allen, a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft Regional Director, as our special guest. So as Bojan mentioned earlier, Kent will take us through his inspiring journey of becoming an MVP, but also a Microsoft Regional Director as well. And lastly, he will talk about how he has created his own tech company as well. So please remember to ask Kent all the questions you have. He will make sure to answer them at the end of the session as well. So let's see if we can get Kent on the stage.
Yeah, and you can hear me.
Yeah, but we cannot see you yet.
You cannot see me now. We had a little challenge with the camera just before when we rehearsed here. So first of all, thanks a lot for the introduction, and thanks a lot for doing this. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And as you mentioned, really love questions. There's nothing more that I love than than doing this here. So I prepared just a little slide deck, and you should see the slide by now. Can one of you just confirm that?
We can see the slides, yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you see? Yeah. You can see the slide?
It's working. Yes.
Perfect. I can hear you now. This is me, and as I said, when I was asked, I love to help. I mean, that's really what I like the most. I love to help talented and gifted people like you, people who are interested and curious about technology and business management and so on and so forth. Let me start with a little background here. So my name is Kent. I'm from Copenhagen in Denmark, and I've been living in Denmark all of my life. I am 53, so I'm a little older than most of you, I guess. But I would say for about 20 years or so, I've been traveling the world pretty much like crazy, or between 150 and 200 business days a year. And in a year, you typically have 220 business days. So I was pretty much, never at home. When I started out, I actually in the beginning pursued a career in marketing. Way back when IT was really not a hot topic, but I quickly learned that when you're working with marketing, you really need to work with data. The more data, the better it is. The better you can predict, pretty much everything. So I had a short career in marketing, and then I started as a developer. So I used to be a database developer back in the days. From developer, I found some passion in infrastructure. So that's what we all know as Azure today. So I've done a lot of SQL implementation, Windows Server implementation, configuration manager implementation. That's also what you alluded to in the introduction. Now it's just Intune. So I've been pretty much all over the IT floor, I would say. Recently, or not recently, but within the last couple of years, I am doing more and more security. And I think for those of you who are working with Intune or Active Directory or any other service that touches a server, something in the cloud, an endpoint, you will find yourself in the security space within not too long. And I'm convinced about that because I see those services melt more and more together. So 5-10 years ago, it was super easy for someone like me to say, well, I'm only working on Windows clients. That's my focus. That's my niche. That's where I'm really good. I don't really have to worry about security except install maybe an antivirus client. But nowadays, the security landscape has completely shifted. So back in the old days, a couple of years ago, a corporate firewall was all we really needed to know about. Now security is all about protecting identities and so on and so forth. So without knowing everything about conditional access, Windows Hello for Business, pretty much everything within Microsoft Entra, then if you don't know that or have a solid understanding, then I would say you might have a challenge. It doesn't really matter what line of IT you work in. Alongside will security also comes compliance. I think we are like 6 billion people on the planet, and a third of those people are regulated by one or more regulations. So like we are in Europe here, we have GDPR, we have NIS2, and so on and so forth. There are so many different global, regional, and local compliance rules. And as a company, I can tell you that's one of the more boring things. When you start your own company, you really just want to do a ton of stuff, cool coding or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you realize, well, we also have to figure out about compliance. We need to, be compliant with these rules and regulations and so on and so forth. And that's super important. My current position, my title is when I go out amongst customers is security principal, and then I'm also a partner at the company called Today. Today is right now primarily a Nordic company. We have about 3,000 colleagues. 800 of them are working as consultants within data and AI. So data and AI is a huge thing for us. We have about 50 of us who are working with cloud infrastructure and security and endpoints. And then we have a lot of developers. We are developing a ton of different applications as well, like a driver license app and so on and so forth. So it's a super interesting company, and I've been here a little while, but you'll see that on the timeline here. So this is just quick short about me. Born and raised in Copenhagen, and you can see the year up here, 1992. Some of you were most likely not even born in 1992, and if you think I'm an old guy, that's perfectly okay. I am. But it was in 92 I changed my position from marketing into a developer, and that may sound like a huge career move, but it really wasn't, because as I said, when working with marketing, I was working with products, I was working with a ton of stuff, and there's so many things I couldn't do. So I started to develop some custom databases, and all of a sudden I was like, hey, that's actually really, really cool. So I did that for a couple of years. And one thing I highly encourage you all to do is, find a mentor. So I found a mentor. I was fortunate enough to sit, in the same office with the main developer that we had, and I spent a lot of time with him, and that just gave me so much. It's not only about tech and coding and what have you, but it's also about business understanding. So when we were developing stuff, he was really. He said, it's really important, Kent, that you understand that we are doing this for that purpose. So we are developing this because we want to transform the business, or because we want to make some changes over here. And getting that understanding was super important. And that one I carry with me still today. And that's also what I inspire my colleagues to do. Always think about the changes and the impact your job will have for the customers that you're working with. Because if it doesn't have an impact, then it's probably maybe not waste of time, but if it doesn't have an impact, if it doesn't have, supports the strategic direction of the company, then your solution and your contribution probably will not live as long as it should do within the company. So always, think about impact, strategy impact, and are you supporting the business goals, pretty much in whatever you do. Then I started up as an infrastructure consultant. So being a developer, it was really fun. But I got an opportunity to start in the infrastructure team. And back then we had something called the Microsoft Back Office Suite. So me being the youngest, the other ones, they picked what they wanted, and then they were like, hey Kent, this product is all that is left. You go and be an expert in that product. That product was called SMS, which today is called Configuration Manager, which is, the cloud version of that is what we know as Intune. That was, I wouldn't say it was a good decision, because there is no decision to make. That was the only product left for me to choose. So it was either that or, do something completely else. But I really found myself being, super happy about that decision there. Today in the world, we have about 200 million devices being managed by what was known as SMS, so being managed by Configuration Manager and or Intune, either combined or separately. So more than 200 million devices. So those devices are primarily Windows endpoints, but there are also a good chunk of Windows servers. We have mobile phones in here, Android, iOS. We have Mac OS devices, and so on and so forth. So it quickly became like this is the standard of what every medium and enterprise organization is using to manage all of their devices on the planet. So that was my niche. It took me a couple of years, and the only thing I really did was I just digged into that product, and that was way back when there was 4 years between each major upgrade, so you had some time to become a specialist in one or maybe two products there. So I spent a lot of time there. Maybe my girlfriend would say too much time, but I found it super fascinating and very interesting. That also led me into a couple of years later to co-found my first, to co-found, first of all, my company. So I co-founded the company called Cortec back in 1999. That's the company I sold to Today last year. The company, I had the company for about 24 years, 25 years, and now I'm a partner in Today. My reason for founding a company was that I wanted to create a space together with my partner where technology was in focus. So we wanted to work with the latest technology. We wanted to make sure that we could make a change with the customers we worked with. And then we wanted to attract, all the coolest individuals that we had in the Copenhagen area. And I'm proud to say that we succeeded in that. I mean, some of the colleagues I've had over the years, that was it's just like insane. So there's been some very talented colleagues in the past here. So I co-founded my own company, and in 2009, and it's not because I didn't do anything for 10 years, but in 2009, I was also the co-founder of a Danish user group. So that was called the System Center User Group. Our primary focus was Configuration Manager, anything related to client management. And co-founding a user group, there is some work in there, absolutely. But one of the things that I've learned is that if you always look for perfect, maybe that will stand in the way of progress. And what I mean is, if you sit down with some friends and you go like, hey, why don't we found a user group? There will be 1,000 things where you start, to discuss, well, then we need this, then we need that, then we, and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden you're looking at each other and you go like, holy cow, that's a lot of work. I mean, and I have to, go now. I don't have time for that. Don't do that. If you want to do something, obviously, think about it for 5 minutes. Always, whenever you get a good idea, think about it for 5 minutes. Sometimes a good idea is, not super great after 4 minutes, and other times it's like, yeah, sure, after 5 minutes, it's still a good idea. But just do it. You do not have to be perfect. And a user group, a community like what you have founded here, which I mean, that's really, really cool. But it's just a bunch of people getting together, doing some knowledge sharing, maybe, find a speaker, maybe eventually, find a sponsor, maybe find a couple of sponsors, and so on and so forth. And if you can, start a user group and you have 10 people there, that's fantastic. Just think about it. Then you have founded something where you are, impacting 10 people's life. And 10 will quickly be 15 and 20 and so on and so forth. So what we did was we ran our user group. We had it 4 times a year, and it was a physical user group. So we contacted our local Microsoft center and said, well, can we borrow a room, once in a while? And they were like, sure, you can do that. And then we tried to reach out to our network to figure out, hey, what do you say? Would you like to come and speak? Do you have something you would like to share? And I think we ran it for like 10, 11, 12 years, something like that. And we were pretty much sold out every single time. And when I say sold out, it was free to participate. But, there is a limit to the number of seats we can have, right? So running this one here also gave me a lot of friends. And that's the thing about community, because then all of a sudden we started, connecting with the Swedish user group, the Norwegian user group. By running a user group, we also had, other friends in the community in other countries that asked for our help. So I know I've assisted with creating a couple of user groups in United States. I've assisted with creating a user group in Norway, in Switzerland, and so on and so forth. And I would say, just like, Nike, really just do it. There is nothing to be afraid of here. And impacting other people's life is fantastic, if you do it in a positive manner, obviously. Okay, so in 2010, I received my first MVP award, and I have been an MVP ever since. And now some of you might be saying, okay, so, what did you really do to become an MVP? Well, beginning of, I think, maybe 2007, I started to write blog posts. And at first it was a colleague of mine. We were like, we need to share notes because, you're doing all this cool stuff. I'm doing all of this cool stuff. And you have it in your laptop and I have my notes in my laptop. Why don't we just share notes? So we're like, okay, so why don't we just share the notes with the whole world? If someone can use the intel, the insights, the information we have, by all means, that would be just good. So we did that, and very, very quickly that blog became huge. So we had like millions of hits, and my other colleagues also started to blog there. We started to develop some smaller utilities that we post on those blogs. So I'm confident that me earning my MVP award back then was because of my blogging. It was because of my involvement in a user group, and then it was also because I was also at that time a public speaker. So I spoke at various conferences, not only Microsoft conferences, but also other user group conferences, like in Norway and Sweden. Yeah. Now, after that, so 2 years, fast forward 2 years, I was contacted first by a publisher, one of the bigger publisher in the industry. They were like asking, hey, what do you say? Would you like to become a co-author for a book together with 4 other authors. And I was like, sure. I have a very hard time saying no. So it's always sure or yes. And that was quite interesting. I mean, writing a book takes a little time, but it's something I would highly recommend for everyone, because you really get to know the products that you work with. Like you know every little aspect of that product. So writing a book is really just almost like writing, a step-by-step guide and then adding in some additional information, obviously. And the thing is, when you know your product, you just have to write about, why this product makes sense to you, because it will also make sense to others. So the first book I co-authored with 4 others, and then I was contacted by another publisher who said, why don't you write your own book? So I started writing my own book, and then that one was also published in back in 2012, and that was quite funny, because back then Microsoft had book signings. So when you went to Ignite, Ignite was called Ticket in Europe and in Australia, New Zealand, and in US, and then you would do book signings and so on and so forth, which is quite interesting, I would say. Moving forward a few years, in 2016, I became a Microsoft Regional Director, and I published my book number 5. So I've been doing a lot of books in between. So a regional director, that's like the secret program of Microsoft. A lot of the Microsoft folks I talk to, they don't really know what it is. So I have to explain it. But I typically explain it like this, where an MVP award demonstrates that you have demonstrated that you have deep technical knowledge and skills in a certain area. So right now I am an MVP within security, identity, and also within Intune. So Microsoft believes that I have deep technical skills and understanding of those services. Being a Microsoft Regional Director, we are I think it's only 200 and something. I don't remember the exact number, but worldwide, where MVPs, I believe we are about 4,000. So there are way less Microsoft Regional Directors. As a Regional Director, you typically run your own business. It's not a requirement, but when I look at the other Regional Directors, they typically run their own business, and they understand business, they understand strategy, they understand how Microsoft can position themselves with all of their solutions. So especially when we talk Azure, how can we onboard an enterprise customer with 300,000 users into Azure and make sure that Azure coexists with some of the other cloud providers that they have. So it's much more about strategy, it's much more about advice. It's really, really interesting. An MVP award is something where you get a 1-year term, then you are renewed. So you have to sign into the MVP member side and say, okay, so I've been doing and these contributions, and then hopefully you have enough contributions. Where regional director, it's a 2-year term. But you don't really know how they judge you. so it's not like we have to go in and say, okay, so I've done all of these things. I remember what they told me was like, we will figure it out. So they follow you. They figure out, if you are in any news articles, if you're publishing books, they figure out somehow what is your impact in the business. And you can be both. I'm both, and I enjoy being both, definitely. And I think maybe half the regional directors are also MVPs in here. Then in 23, as I said, I sold my company, And so by then I've had my company for 24 years. And why do you want to sell your own company when you have a company? And I think for me, and we are about 40-50 people in my company. For me, it's all about, how can we really make an impact to our customers? How can we go out and say, we want to change you? And some of the customers we work with are some of the biggest enterprises in the world. It's also a lot of small and medium-sized customers in Denmark and Sweden and so on, but we're also working with some of the larger ones. And some of the things I could see was that if you really want to go out and be, being able to hunt and track some of the enterprise customers, you also need to have, not only security skills, Azure skills, endpoint management skills, but you also need to have data and AI skills. So you need to be a part of a bigger family. So that was really one of the main reasons why we did that. So we did spend some time investigating the company, because it was super important that they care about people. We really care about people. We treat all colleagues, we pretty much treat them like family members, because we're working so closely together. And I've had my colleagues for many, many, many years, so I know their kids, and I know their spouses, their wives, their husbands, and so on and so forth. And last year, I also engaged in something called Ready School. Ready School, you probably haven't heard about that, but we have a lot of refugees, coming into Denmark, into Sweden, into Germany, into all parts of Europe. And some of those refugees are here, they're all here for a reason, right? But some of them have a high degree. They might have a college background. Some might be lawyers. Some might be, there's just a ton of potential in these people here, and they're all women, by the way. And what they want is they want to find a way into the cybersecurity world. So you might have a lawyer coming from Ukraine, for instance, and now have to flee the country, and try to find their way into cybersecurity, try to find their way into AI, trying to find their way into anything IT related, really. And Microsoft is engaged in that. Ready School is engaged in that. You can, if you just Google Bing Ready School, there are Ready School organizations in a lot of different countries. But what I do with them is I teach them, I train them. So every Wednesday afternoon, evening, I train them for like 3 or 4 hours and prepare them to take their first Microsoft certificate. So they will be prepared to take the SC900, which is like the intro security exam. That's super neat. And you don't have to be an old person like me to do this. You have plenty of knowledge here to go in and assist if you want to do that. To me, it has been like really rewarding. Now, those are just some of the years. Then I was like, but I've done so much more. I just couldn't fit it into one slide. So I've done public speaking pretty much all over the world. Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Finland, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Brazil, US, Hong Kong, Spain, Qatar, France. I mean, you have the names down there. So, and that's really that's one of the things that the Microsoft community has to offer to you as well. Once you become an MVP, if you want to become an MVP, and if you like to speak, even if you don't like to speak, try it out with a co-speaker. But then you will have, you will be given opportunities like this, and it's always a little nerve-wracking, obviously, travel to United States and then stand there on a scene in front of 1,500 people, but you can do it. I'm convinced that you can do it. And a good advice here is, as I said, do it together with another one. Do it together with a mentor. He or she will learn you a ton of stuff. There are so many different techniques. There are so many things you should and shouldn't be doing. And most of all, you should really just be enjoying it. Even though, as I said, your heartbeat will go up a little bit, and you might be sweating a little bit. You might be stumbling over the words, but hey, it's fantastic once you get to do it. So as I said, I was also, writing a bunch of blog posts. I was a mentor. I am still a mentor. I was assisting and are still assisting Microsoft with the startup program. So that's organizations that want to, start a new company, and maybe they need some inspiration about the products they can use. Maybe they need to, assistance, help building a business case, and so on and so forth. And once you get, an MVP award, you can do you will see the product group. They will start asking you questions, because Microsoft, they need you. They need to hear from customers, but they especially need you because you will tell them what's working and what's not working. And they need that. They need to know if they make, don't waste your time with this feature because nobody's really using that feature, or this feature over here is really cool, but can you just tweak it? So as an MVP, you do have an impact of the services and the products being released. Then we have articles. So that would be like newspaper articles, on LinkedIn and what have you. And you are part of a really unique community. So one of the things that I would advise you to is, reach out if you know a journalist. If you don't know a journalist, maybe reach out to someone like me and say, hey Kent, do you know a journalist? I do know a couple, and then I can connect you with that journalist, and I can also introduce you and say, well, we have a really, really interesting group of people here. They're doing all of this. Don't you believe there is a story? And typically they will set up an interview, and all of a sudden you are, in Denmark we have something called Computer World, but you have all of these IT magazines all over the world. What you're doing is interesting, and it's super important, and the whole world needs to know about that. So this is like just some of the highlights here. I'm just looking at time. I only have 2 slides though. So a couple of insights for starting your career. First of all, yeah, you can do it. You have already taken the first steps by joining this community. That shows that you believe in the community. It shows that you are willing to take responsibility for your own career planning. So yes, you can absolutely do it. And then think about the skills you have outside of your current position. I usually say that it's really good that you know your IT. It's really good that you know your way around DevOps, your way around coding and so on and so forth. But the world, and with that I mean businesses, they really, really need soft skills as well. I mean, soft skills are super important and often what I call undervalued, not by the businesses, but by the individuals themselves. So when you are applying for a position, obviously you have, you have your grades, you have done good, but you have some other things that are super, super important. First of all, you need curiosity. That's what I say to all of my colleagues. You need to be curious. If you're not curious, working in IT is probably not for you, because IT is really about, as I said a few times, all the changes you can make, all the impact that you can have on businesses and other people's life. So be curious, and you are curious. Otherwise, you wouldn't spend Thursday evening here. You have problem solving skills. So when you've been through school, 3-year education, 5-year education, doesn't really matter. One of the things that they teach you there is problem solving skills. You have them. You have, just imagine how many different times you have been facing an exam, or you've been facing something you had to turn in, like do some paperwork. You are constantly maturing your problem solving skills. So think about them, because that again is something that we need. And then you have something that is much more mature than I had when I was in the beginning of my career. You are so much more agile. Your communication skills are so much better. You are so much better, to adopt, new things. And why are you so much more agile? Why are your communication skills so much better? Because you're international from day one. I just spent a weekend with my 10-year-old nephew in England, and the kid is actually having conversations in English, and I go like, his name is Kalle, so I go like, hey Kalle, how do you speak English? You have had English in school for 1 year. The answer, YouTube. So it's like, so he also had like an Irish accent. So apparently the YouTuber is from Ireland or something like that. And he used the F word a few times. So you don't do that. But he was having a conversation with a taxi driver. He was having conversations with the people we met, and so on and so forth. You have that. And that's super valuable. So curiosity, make sure you highlight that. Because if you are not curious, you wouldn't apply for a position. Build and grow your network. Here we are. You invited me, and I'm super happy to be here. Reach out, find me on LinkedIn. Let's hook up. And then Saturday morning when you wake up, you go like, he said something about a journalist. Why don't I reach out? Maybe you don't know me, but what's the worst thing that can really happen? The worst thing that can really happen is that I ignore your question and I don't get back to you. That's the worst thing. I will get back to you, but that's the worst thing. But what's the best thing that can happen? Well, I get back to you. Maybe we figure out some journalist that can write a story about what you're doing, and your local community will say, hey, what the devil? We need to get a hold of that guy or girl. They need to come here and work. You have the courage. You are curious, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So use that curiosity, use that courage to build your network. And when you're building your network, maybe you don't need that relationship today. Maybe you need that relationship 3 years from today, right? So the network is super important. Then also remember, and this might sound like your parents. I've heard my father tell me this. Rome wasn't built in a day. And I'm like, that what the devil do you mean about Rome wasn't built in a day? Yeah, you don't have to achieve everything at once. And it takes a little while to figure out that he was actually right. And I learned it, I would say I learned it early on. Find a mentor. Don't think that you have to solve everything yourself. Find a mentor. Learn from him or her. You don't have to have the same mentor, your entire career. You will have different mentors. You will also become a mentor yourself. You will have mentees. That's actually the best way to learn, when you teach others. So always, search for a mentor, search for someone where you can become the mentor. It's extremely rewarding. And if I was to start in the IT industry, I would definitely, find a place where I could work, where there would be, a good diverse set of people. So women, men, different ages. Obviously, there needs to be, more than just you. I mean, you don't want everybody else to be 58 years old. You want, as I said, you want different ages, but you want to make sure that you find a place where you can stay for 3, 4, 5 years. That should be part of your career plan, and learn something. You don't have to become a .com billionaire before you reach the age of 30. There are so many different routes for you to take. That's also why I said Rome wasn't built in a day. Make a choice, be curious about it, love new ideas for at least 5 minutes before you discard them. And then remember, the best thing you can do is learn from others. So that was my. Let me just stop sharing here. That was my few words. I don't know if I talked over time, but I hope it was valuable.
It was
if you have
really
any
good.
questions, okay. If you have any questions, just reach out, and just remember the few things. Connect. Maybe I'm not the smartest person on the planet, but maybe I can connect you to someone who is, right? That's how community works. Cool.
So there is actually a few comments, and actually there is one from one of your students, Sai, saying, "I'm so glad to be your student, Kent. You are the best."
Thanks a lot.
And then there is a question from Isaiah: how to become an MVP today? So
how to become an MVP today? That's it's not like you have to do only, write blog posts, or you have to speak or anything like that. The most important thing is that you figure out, so in what area would you like, what's really driving you, what's motivating you. I would, if it was security and identity, for instance, I'm an MVP in that area. I would try to see if there are any user groups. You check Meetup, for instance. There are other platforms. There is always one or two of those user groups going on. Try to see if you can be part of that. A lot of the speakers who are veteran speakers, they love to have someone on stage who might be young. You don't have to take like half an hour presentation. Maybe first time do 5 minutes, do 2 minutes. Maybe you have a tip or trick, something like that. But getting in touch with the community is definitely a way forward, I would say.
Yeah, and then the second question: how to know when you are enough of an expert in your field to start sharing your knowledge? What if you're still learning the advanced level of your craft?
So that's a really good question. We are 6 billion on the planet, and I guarantee you're not the dumbest. So there must be someone who will learn from what you have to share. That was really because my colleague and I were asking ourselves the very same question. So who would be interested in our notes? And then we realized, 2-3 years later, we had 1 million hits. So there is always someone somewhere who you will assist and who you will help. Don't think that if I share this, some of the smart people, they will laugh at me or something like that. No. You will help someone. Maybe you will not help your neighbor. Maybe you will help someone, in another country and so on. I've met people when I go to conferences that came over and shook my hand because like 7 or 8 years ago, I helped them with a blog post maybe. And I was like, but that blog post? But yeah, just do it. Don't wait for perfect, because perfect will never be here. And don't compare yourselves to some of the persons that are blocking constantly where it looks super professional. It's not about that. It's really just about helping.
Then the next question from Thomas: does being a regional director have an influence on your job?
Yeah, that's a good question, Thomas. Not really. I would say, but then again, I mean, obviously there is always something that will influence your job when you have an award. Doesn't really matter if it's an MVP or whatever. So I like what Microsoft is doing. When you sign or when you receive the regional director award, you will sign code of conduct. Like we treat everybody with respect, diversity, all of that, and I live by that every single day. So have that had an influence on my job? Maybe, but it's not like I got a raise or anything like that. But then again, I was also in my own company. It does open doors, definitely. So yeah, it has an influence, and it also when we now next week we have Ignite. So when there are these big Microsoft conferences, there would usually be like a special regional director, half-day conference or get together, and where we typically meet some of the top presidents and vice presidents in Microsoft. So yeah, there is a little influence there. Good question.
So Marco and Bojan, do you have any questions as well?
Yes, I wanted to ask Ken that how has your marketing background supported your career in IT? And
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think to me it's really important, as I said a few times, to me it's really important that we do this for a reason. That nobody wants to invest €1 million in an IT project if it doesn't have an impact. So the marketing background there helped me understand, the business, stuff like that, work with data, but also remember, you see from my hair here, I'm an old guy. So way back then, if I took an IT, so if I took an IT degree in college or university, they were super old. They were, nobody wanted them. So IT back then was really, you had to be self-made. So you've probably also heard about a lot of the Americans. They dropped out of college and they started their own company because there was no IT really education back then. That has changed, and where I work. We in Denmark we have a 5-year IT education. We have different IT education, but especially one that's 5-year where you get to learn about coding and infrastructure and network and so on and so forth. I think over the years I've had like 8 or 9 or 10 colleagues with that background. Some are still with us, even after 20 years. So that's really cool. So the IT educations we have, I mean, I only know about the ones we have in Denmark, but they're really good. Yeah.
thank you. I also wanted to ask, you said it a couple of times, always think about the impact of your work.
Yeah.
What other valuable lessons have you learned throughout your experience that will help young people like us just starting out?
Yeah. So when you're starting out, as I said, find a mentor, find a good workplace where they value who you are. I mean, when you're fresh out of college, I mean, you know a lot of things. You have a lot of energy, as I said. You're curious. There's a ton of stuff you know about the tech, but maybe working with customers, how would you have known that? You have been in school for all of your life, and working with customers. There are some unwritten rules, and we have the expression, you need to learn how to read the room. And that just takes a little experience. So you can save yourself a lot of headache by finding an organization where there will be a couple of mentors. Yeah. So that would be my one of my biggest advices here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, and also I have some questions for you, Kent. So firstly, I wouldn't like to go into technical details. I would like to speak to ask you about some questions about the soft skills, because I completely agree with what you have said in your presentation, that the soft skills are not valued at all. And I'm one of those people who are for having for the employees to have soft skills, and also for us young people to have soft skills when we are working at I'm in an IT company. So how we can improve that, and how we can change the mindset of of this generation, the old one, who still thinks
my
that
generation.
if you have IT skills, then you're great. But if you don't have soft skills, then okay, it doesn't count.
So first of all, I mean, obviously you also need to have, I mean, if you apply for a position in IT, you need to have, some IT skills. But skills, you can always get skills. You don't have to be the best when it comes to the skill level when you apply for a position. As a matter of fact, when I read some of the job posts, I go like, holy cow. I cannot check half of them, because on the job post, I don't know who write the job post, but they just throw in all the words and technologies that they know. But as I said, it's I would say it's your responsibility to teach them. So when, for instance, if you are in a job interview, and I mean you are invited in for a reason, they like your CV, they like your your cover letter, and so on and so forth. And in the cover letter, you have also highlighted how your soft skills actually impact your work. So, for instance, you have good communication skills, meaning that when and if you have to troubleshoot something, you can do that in different languages. You have a a good network, meaning that when they hire you, obviously they hire you. And I say this a lot, when you hire me, when a customer hires me, you obviously hire me, but you also hire my entire network. And that's really valuable to an organization. It's valuable to a customer, but it's also valuable to me as a business. So I know, if I get to work with Marco, I not only get to work with Marco, but I also get to work with Niklas and with you, Boyan, and with everybody else. And that's a soft skill. You can only develop your community or your network because you're curious and because you have courage. Because we have all been in a situation where we really like to go over there and talk to that person, but we don't really, now it's not really the good time, and he or she looks busy, and so, but you have the courage to do that. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. And you may not realize it yourself, but just being here, a huge thing. So you have, so that's really what I meant with the soft skills. Write down the soft skills you have, talk about them. I would also like to have a discussion with you if that helps. But you have soft skills, and what does it really mean when you have, as I said, good communication skills? Well, for business, it means that I can also do this and this and this. So that's why it's also why I say you just have to train them. Maybe the employees don't really understand it, but then you just teach them.
And one last question, because you mentioned you have created a company and then sold that company, and also in the meantime you have become an MVP and then a regional director. So there's a lot of things happening in in that in that decade or so. So where do you find that motivation to to go from one another challenge to conquer that challenge, and then in the end, you sell your company. So because that takes a lot of time and energy and everything. So how do you find your motivation to do all the things at once?
Yeah. So I mean, it was over a 24-year period. so it was still but I mean, I think that's mainly because of the curiosity, but also, I mean, I'm very dedicated. So if I was to describe, what is my best skill, I would say it's the dedication to work hard. And that's just, working hard beats, in my opinion, beats talent every single day. Not only in the world of sports, but also in the world of in the business world. So just remember, if you work, let's say you work an extra hour every day, then you have been working 5 hours more per week than Niklas. That's 20 hours more per month. That's 200 hours more in a year. So if you do that for 10 years, that's 2,000 hours more. What can you achieve in those 2,000 hours? A ton of stuff. And I'm not saying you have to work 24/7. You don't have to do that, because you need to have a good solid base where you do something else, where you don't think about IT, where you hang out with your friends, where you hang out with your girlfriends, your boyfriends, whatever. That's also important, because you need to have a good balance in life. But work, I mean, again, just like you're doing here, it's Thursday evening. There's probably something on in the television, but you're not seeing that. You have made a choice to be here. So yeah, just continue that. And then really, as I said, also love the ideas for 5 minutes. So when you hear something, don't say no. Don't be like, I've met a lot of people who are really just on autopilot. You ask them something, they just say no. They haven't even thought about it. Like, how can you even have thought about my question? So just love an idea for 5 minutes. You still don't have to say yes, but at least give it 5 minutes, because it could change your life. Yeah.
So I think we have a last question from Maria. Do you have example of soft skills and how to get better at it?
Do I have examples of soft skills? Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, communication, curiosity, being able to network, but also I don't know if I mentioned that, but let me just check that in a second. Otherwise, I'll share the slides here if that's of any interest. Your problem-solving skills and your skills to adapt. That's your generation. The things that we throw at you, it's insane. I mean, things has never moved as fast as they do right now, and things will never move as slowly as they do right now. Just think about that. It's insane. So you have developed the ability to change, constantly change. You're adopting new technology. You're adopting new everything, not every day, but at a pace that's insane. When I started out, a product would be there for 4 years, then there would be a new upgrade. Now, when you work with Intune, you have like monthly releases. When you work with Azure, you have weekly, sometimes daily releases. So that's a soft skill, the ability to adapt to the surroundings that you work in. That's super. I mean, that's super valuable.
All right. I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you very much, Ken, for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thank you very much for all the questions. So everyone, have a great day and a great evening. Bye.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. Bye.